And here, let me get my Twitter up too here. Let me get myself up and running as well. I hear it. It's very nice.
Yep. Sure, let's do it. I'll fire the tweet out.
All right.
Hello, everybody out there in the YouTube world. Welcome to a nice matinee edition of Off-Nominal.
Real early.
Yeah, what do you mean? What do you mean real early? It's what time is it here? It's 5 o'clock in the evening here. What are you talking about?
Well, see, you are helping us really make this an optimal event for the vast majority of our audience, who usually, Jake and I do this way too late Eastern time, past my bedtime typically, which is still early on the West Coast. And then the Europeans are like, well, I guess I'll just watch that one in the morning. But occasionally we get a nice matinee edition, and everyone is quite happy about it. So
Totally.
Excellent. Well, hopefully we get some folks over here on this side of the Atlantic to join us here this morning or evening.
Yeah. We've got some listeners in our chat room, our private chat room on Discord, and I know we've got one from Ireland, one from Sweden in there, and they're showing us their drinks too. So it looks like we've got some UK in there as well. Yeah, they're showing up. That's good.
All right, excellent. All of us over here further to the east, we're already. It's 5 o'clock somewhere right here.
Directly
right
where we're virtually there right now, virtually in a land that has less COVID and is easier to manage. You made the expert decision to bail out, huh?
Yeah.
You know, it is kind of humorous. You know, New York City is really our family home, but we left New York when it was the original ground zero for COVID, and we went to, I had my place in Austin from before, I got married. And at that time, Texas had almost no COVID, at least that they knew of. And so we fled down there. And then when that became, one of the next key points, we fled to Europe. But Europe was already banning Americans. Fortunately, my wife is French, has a French passport, and I have a British passport. So we could get ourselves.
So you weren't Americans when you showed up. You were like,
we showed up. Look at us. We're locals. And but in fact, they just added a new mask mandate back here because it's actually going up a little bit. So maybe we are the cause. Wherever we go, the infection rates rise. But I don't think I had a chance to tell you. I've actually been tested for COVID 5 times.
Ooh.
Is that the up the nose one?
Yeah. Oh yeah. But I was doing it because I was planning to go on a deep sea expedition.
Yes.
The dates kept moving, and now they've continued to move. But I had to get tested to be able to go through Guam. I had to be tested within 72 hours of landing. So anyway, I've had 5 tests, all came back negative. I'm pretty sure, I've been clear up until a few days ago. So I think I'm safe. But
that's amazing.
We'll see.
Man, I cannot wait for some of those stories here. Should we get going on the real show here, Jake? I've got my buttons ready to push.
I think we're ready. The tweet is out.
All right. I'll do the intro today, Jake.
Sure.
I've been thinking about it.
Okay.
Not really, but
Richard, usually we start the theme music, and then in that split second we make a really fast decision who has to talk first, and it's very, very
all right, excellent. Well, that works. All right.
And last time we didn't, so I was
No, last time we just had silence. It was good.
CLS's go for main engine start.
You can all hear that, right?
Yeah.
Cool.
Go at throttle up. Negative return. Then we see a nominal MECO. Welcome to space.
Jake, welcome to Off-Nominal. I've got 2 orders of business to start the show. Number 1, we had Richard, we had NASA Administrator Jim Bridenstine on 2 episodes ago, and after that one, my brother said to me, "You didn't say who you were the entire time, and I feel like you probably should say who you were." So I'm Anthony Colangelo, and my co-host in Vancouver is Jake Robbins.
How you doing?
That's order of business number 1. Number 2,
all right.
Occasionally I have moments in my life when I think, what we do is really weird. And recently, on a recent episode, we were a drink or two too far in with Jason Davis, and we mixed up two astronauts, and then one of them corrected us on Twitter, and then we said, you know what, we should make this up to you. You should come on the show. And he said, okay, but you're going to have to wait because I'm going to the literal bottom of the ocean. So you need to wait a couple of weeks. And we said, okay, we can deal with that. And here we are with Richard Garriott, Lord British himself. How you doing, Richard?
Excellent, excellent. You know, I still haven't made it to the bottom of the ocean yet, but that's another topic.
You've been close enough in my book. Yeah, we're going to get into that because I've got a lot of questions about the bottom of the ocean to talk about today.
Excellent, excellent.
So yeah, you're in Paris, so we're doing a matinee edition. We're stretching the time zones today.
And I appreciate you guys willing to get up early and not make me stay up too late. So we're just in time for cocktail hour.
Yeah, what do you got over there?
Yeah, what do you got?
Well, so this is a drink that I learned from the little cafe that's literally just a few doors down from me. I don't know what they call it. I failed to write it down, but I did remember to ask how it was made because I really enjoyed it. So it's a mix of limoncello and Prosecco with a little bit of lime and mint. So
wow. Oh my God.
Limoncello, Prosecco, lime and mint. It's very tasty, very refreshing, nice and summery, delicious.
I am super jealous of that for so many reasons.
We're getting outclassed here, I think.
What do you got? So, and what are you drinking?
So
milk in the morning, or
so it is 8 a.m. Here in Vancouver. So I was thinking, I have drank. I'll admit it. I've had beer pretty early in the morning, but I just didn't think that this was the right. So I got coffee and I put it in my Jim Bridenstine fan club mug here, but I wanted to tart it up a little bit. So I have this. This is a distillery in Grimsby, Ontario called 40 Creek, and they make a great whiskey. And this is a whiskey cream liqueur. And so I figured I would just, top up the coffee a little bit with this, and that way I can.
I love that you're mixing it live on air too. That's fantastic.
It's part of the magic, Anthony. Just gotta stir it around a little bit.
I've got two tall boys here, 2 pounders, both relevant. So the first one I've got is called Galaxy and Comet. Let me get my focus.
Oh, nice.
I guess it only focuses on my face because I have face detection on. This is not. I didn't plan for this. So I got this. Obviously, we're in the days of a nice comet that has come through the first time in a long time. Something that's nice and visible. I've had horrible weather, so I have not yet seen it. It's been cloudy every night. You know why? Because I bought this new tiny telescope here that I could have for planetary times in the city, and it's been cloudy every day since. And the second one I got, it's called Supervillain, and this just looked so Richard Garriott that I had to just buy it for this show.
Nice,
look at that thing.
Nice.
Because that just looks
very
too good
nice
for today. So
that's great.
Fantastic.
So, Richard, our show is just a pretty laid back, casual space chat. And
great.
Typically we come in with like, we got a couple of nice topics to talk about. We have way too many stories to get to of every variety. I read your book over the last week to study up a little bit more.
Excellent.
You can see I've got my Skylab shirt rocking today.
Oh, even better.
So I want to start with Skylab because I'm a huge Skylab fan. Your dad flew on the second crewed mission, what number did he use to refer to that? Because
2.
Everyone uses is it Skylab 4? Does it go up to, or does it only go up to 3? I don't know.
Yeah. Well, so here's the way my family broke it down. So Skylab, Roman numeral 1, Roman numeral 2, and Roman numeral 3 were the crewed missions. But the launches were SL, English number 1, SL 2, 3, and 4. And so the launch of the vehicle was SL1, SL2 would be the first crew, SL3 would be my dad's crew, SL4 the final crew. So to me, there's no confusion.
Yeah, that makes total sense.
How you have to write the nomenclature. But that's funny because like on my mission patch that's so far behind me you can't really see it there. I was flying on Soyuz TMA-13. And I came down on Soyuz TMA-12.
Oh, yeah.
but I only found out after I was already training and had my patches made that my own increment actually had its own nomenclature. I was VC-15, but my own patch doesn't even say that on it because nobody explained this to me, that because I was really up and down with no one else was, yeah, there you go, you got it. No one else went up and down on the exact same increment as me. So that's literally my own mission, which is amazing. VC-15. And the VC stands for visiting crew. So any of the short duration crews, the long ones are called expeditions. So Expedition 19, Expedition 20 were going when I was up. And then I was VC-15 was literally my increment.
Huh. And you got the crew nomenclature there. You weren't a crew participant.
Oh, well, the space flight participant, so what's interesting is I still argue with folks about this all the time. As I'm sure you guys are well aware, anyone who's flown privately, the 6 of us who've flown privately, people love to call space tourists. And there are people like Charles Simonyi who flew twice to space. So there's actually been 7 flights, 6 people privately. Charles flew just before me and just after me, and he goes, I did go as a tourist. I said he had nothing to accomplish. He was there to have a good time. He paid his way and enjoyed his time and doesn't mind being called a tourist. I, on the other hand, have a problem with it because I actually built the company to take all of us there. I'm one of the co-founders of the company. I took on an incredibly heavy load of scientific and commercial work to help pay for my current flight and hopefully build businesses to pay for future flights. I was doing this as a professional endeavor, but just not a government endeavor. So I consider myself a private astronaut, not a tourist. But NASA and Russia actually have a contract with each other that says anyone who flies that's not a NASA or Roscosmos career professional or one of their other partner agency professionals, they will be referred to as spaceflight participants, not as astronauts. And so, which of course I find, unnecessarily insulting. Exclusionary. But interestingly, all the other astronauts, which are members of an organization, if you've orbited the Earth at least once, you're invited to join something called the Association of Space Explorers. They all call me an astronaut, and they're quick to point out that in the Association of Space Explorers in Russia, in the Russian language, is the Association of Spaceflight Participants. So actually, in the Russian language, they're not really trying to be insulting. That's really what they call it in Russia. I just think in English it doesn't sound right. I mean,
no.
Call me an astronaut. Get over it. Call me an astronaut.
I'm really glad now to know that in all the tweets where I called you an astronaut, I was breaking NASA rules. That kind of makes it really on brand for our podcast.
Tear down those gates. Unnecessary gatekeeper. Richard, in every one of your games that you develop for all of eternity from this point forward, there should be a NASA gatekeeper, like somebody that's named like NASA and is a gatekeeper.
Yeah, the NASA, NASA. But yeah, that's a very, very good idea, and obviously you're familiar enough with the games to realize that I do that a lot with people who have run cross ways with people or companies. And since you tipped it there, just for those who aren't familiar, for example, there's another long-term executive in the video game industry, a guy named Trip Hawkins, one of the founders of Electronic Arts, and he and my companies have often come head-to-head on various subjects. And so Trip Hawkins, spelled backwards, is Pert Snikwa, and in my games, Pert Snikwa is the most nefarious pirate to ever sail the 7 seas, and always shows up doing something no good, and eventually became a ghost pirate, and still literally enshrouded the Avatar is haunting the lands. So it's he lives on.
So pick your least favorite NASA administrator, and then flip the name around.
Exactly. Oh, exactly. And I have one. NASA actually, 72 hours prior to my launch, tried to stiff arm me into not even entering the United States segment of the ISS. And when I got this, letter from NASA saying you're banned from going in the U.S. segment, please sign here that you agree. I was like, what do I do with this? I can't even talk to lawyers. And my crewmates. I'm in quarantine in Kazakhstan. Yeah, exactly. It was 72 hours prior to launch. And my crewmates said, Richard, they can't stop us. They literally could. I mean, we're all going to go fly together. Just ignore it. And so I ignored it for about 24 hours. And then NASA came back and said, if you don't sign this, we're going to cancel all the experiments that our people have been doing with you, even things that would help NASA. The stuff that's for NASA, they were going to cancel it all if I wasn't willing to sign this. And I showed that to my crewmates, and they went, okay, we have a new plan. The new plan is that once we get in space, whoever the ISS commander is makes the rules, right? It's the laws of the sea. And so even if you sign this, we can override it in orbit. And I said, well, that's good, but I need to make sure NASA understands and agrees to that. And so I called NASA on the phone and said, do you agree that the ISS commander can overrule what I'm signing right here? And they went, oh, yeah, that's the way the rules work. And I went, put it in the contract, which they did. And so then I signed it, sent it back to them. We got into space. The ISS crew commander said, welcome to the ISS, Richard. Go back and do your business like you were planning to originally and ignore that contract. And so, but you're right. But I won't name him here.
I probably have in the past. I bet we might have the same one. So
there's odds are you've interviewed them, and but yeah. So I know just who to put in future games. So
he's got to be the gatekeeper.
So, gatekeeper.
Yeah.
Exactly.
I don't think there's a lot of math necessary to go back and find out when your flight was, and then
Exactly. That's easy. That's easy.
The crazy thing about Richard,
it's the Johnson Space Center, by the way. It wasn't not headquarters. It wasn't the administrator. In this case, it was the head of Johnson.
Okay.
Meddling. Richard's book is a must-read for all space fans, precisely because of stories like that. You know, I found it interesting on all parts because my day job is software, so there was, you know, the relevancy of your stories of the game development industry were relevant to my personal life. But the space side, you go on at length in these stories that aren't the things that are going to be written about in typical media, or your entry on pooping in space was the most descriptive and wonderful description of that, which is always like the jokey topic that everyone wants to talk about. But the way that you wrote that entry is wonderful, and I know our friend Brendan Byrne will be pumped to read that. And there's so many of these little like anecdotes that you kind of put throughout the book. One thing I'm curious about, you mentioned, you know, your relationship with your father throughout the book and the way that, you know, he was an old school astronaut on Skylab and Shuttle. You mentioned, you know, both that you had a great relationship in terms of the space world, but you also said that in the early days, he wasn't like talking a lot about being an astronaut. Maybe it felt just like it was his job. I'm curious if that was something that was consistent through his life, or did it change over time once he was out of day-to-day astronaut business and thinking less about office politics and more about space? Did that change in his take on things at all?
Well, you know, fascinating you should ask that question, because in fact it did change, but quite late in life. And I didn't get a chance to write about this in the book, but so all through my growing up, and even after we moved out and was a young to middle-aged professional, my dad was the way I described in the book, which was very much like Spock, literally the unemotional, simple, logical, perfect, analytical person. Never said anything compassionate or heartfelt to anyone that I ever met, family included. But this one time, and we'd all been to NASA with him many times. All of us as kids had, gone on the NASA tour with my dad, but it was, okay, here's the usual, work stuff. And, but my sister-in-law, Marcy, the wife of my older brother, bought at an auction a tour of NASA given by my father. And so that was, she was the high bidder. So we all showed up and said, all right, Dad, give it, we haven't been back over there on campus in 10 or 20 years. Give us the tour. And it was completely different than any of us had ever experienced before in our lives. And we're not sure if it was the time that went by or because it was his daughter-in-law that had made this heartfelt purchase. But for whatever reason, suddenly, for the first time, and I'm sure I was easily in my 40s already, might have been close to 50, my dad gave this incredibly passionate tour of all the NASA facilities. You could tell how much he really appreciated it, how much he, was proud of it, how much he felt about the trip itself during the trip. I mean, it was like he was a changed human being, but it was really quite recent that change occurred. So, but yeah, it did.
That's really fun to think about, because it kind of reminds me, like, there was Skylab has a little bit of a reputation. The crews that went to Skylab had a reputation for sort of eventually skirting around the rules a little bit, right? And so
Yeah, your space mutiny there did not start on your flight.
No.
Well, even little things like, well, so what's funny is even though my dad, like I said, was Spock, there were these little clues that I had throughout my life that there was something else in there. Like, my dad, there was a local Chevy dealer that literally gave cars to all the astronauts. And so almost all astronauts drove a Corvette because it was a free car given to them by some local dealership. My dad, however,
not because there was a Corvette, you don't think? There had to be some of them that were like, oh, it's a Corvette, I'm definitely driving that. Not because it was free.
No. They got their pick of cars. I'm just saying, of course, they picked the Corvette. They picked the Corvette. The dealer said, what do you want? I want the Corvette. My dad said, hey, Owen Garriott, what do you want? I want the station wagon. It's very practical, And so that was the free car that my dad got, was the station wagon. But he bought from a different dealership a Mustang. And I'm like, okay, it's a nice car. And, when I get old enough to drive to school and can borrow Dad's car, I take it down, and all the other kids go like, hey, what's it got under the hood? And I'm going like, hell if I know. I'm sure it's whatever the standard, cheapest, smallest thing is that exists. And they pop the hood and go, no, that's actually a bigger engine, and it's got a 4-barrel carburetor and all this kind of stuff. I'm going like, no way. They say, oh, that has to be special ordered. And I'm going like, no way. That my dad would never pay extra, never special order anything like that. And so I went home to my dad and said, oh, hey, Dad, explain the car to me because my friends have noticed. And he go like, oh yeah, I special ordered that. So he did. He had this little streak in him that he kind of hid from the rest of us.
So I want to ask you some questions about so you're kind of uniquely positioned to speak about this. We're seeing a bit of a change in how commercial human space flight is going to happen, right? I mean, and you were on the ground floor of that with Space Adventures and building that up. But you're seeing a lot of stuff happen like just this year. So SpaceX with their new Crew Dragon, and Boeing's coming up with Starliner. Axiom is building this space station. Space Adventures is suddenly like back in the news again, where we're seeing some stuff happening with them. What's your take on all this? I want to kind of hear how you feel about everything that's happening with all that.
Well, first of all, I think that the commercial side is critical to driving costs down, access up. I think, quote, tourism is only going to be a tiny piece of the market. I actually think while that will help, it's still going to be expensive. And so, but what's happening is, imagine that you have an experiment you want to do in space. If you can imagine one, it's also really expensive to get to space. So if you have a good idea, but it then has to face a phenomenal amount of cost, there's good odds that cost will reduce the probability of ever pursuing that idea. But we've already now seen, if you look at the peak price of putting either a kilogram into orbit or a person into orbit, the peak price and frankly the peak danger was on the Space Shuttle. And so the Space Shuttle, it was easily over $100 million per astronaut to send them there, and about a 1 out of 70 chance of death to launch them into space.
Yeah.
We're now, even at the prices that you and I can go on the internet and book a Falcon 9 launch, and even though Elon, they haven't really published their commercial rates yet, but you can
you've got a different internet than I do, I think.
Yeah, so you can figure it out. But it's gone from hundreds of millions to now we're down into tens of millions. So it's already 10 times cheaper. And Elon thinks he can get it down to the ones of millions, and that would make it 100 times cheaper. And so whatever it is you're thinking about doing, making some plastics, 3D printing stuff, pulling threads of fiber optic glass that are more pure in space, crystallization stuff that I was doing when I was up there, when the price goes down 100-fold, then it's a lot easier for entrepreneurs and people who have great ideas to think, I can raise the money to do that. It's literally 100 times easier to raise the money now than it was, a couple of years ago. And so that's what's really changing. But I've been in the business not only of sending people to space, but the team that I worked with to do that, we also did other kind of extreme exploration companies. So we did something called Deep Ocean Expeditions to take people down to the Titanic and other deep targets, and kind of a spinoff of that is the one that's going down to all the way down to the Marianas Trench, now. There's another company called Adventure Networks International, which is the only company that operates on the interior of Antarctica. One of the guys that worked on both those also used to guide people up to the top of Mount Everest. And all of those trips that I just spoke of, they all cost somewhere in the neighborhood of $100,000, and they all are arduous, and they all involve some risk. Like, if you think about climbing Mount Everest, it includes an incredible level of risk, much higher, frankly, than I'm willing to.
Some risk, says misery. The guy who got literally stuck under the Titanic.
but climbing Everest is literally far more painful and far higher risk than I am willing to undertake, at least at this stage. I can't imagine doing it unless I build a special quadra bike with an inflatable hyperbaric chamber. But that's another story about my plan for how I might eventually do Everest.
The only guy that will ever climb Mount Everest in a mech. My money is on you, exactly. For sure.
That's it. That's the plan. And but until then, the point of that is that I've thought about price. I've worked in companies that have been studying price elasticity of very expensive, somewhat dangerous, a little bit arduous, training required activities. And so when you think about suborbital, which Virgin and Blue are both about to open up, within months or a couple of years at the worst, I think that to the degree that they can get the price back under the $100,000 marker, then I think there's an ongoing business for that, just like there is for these other experiences. To the degree that it stays above $100,000, then I worry that they'll run out of market share. Mm-hmm. Similarly, if we're going to orbit, I think that if anytime you're north of $1 million, it's a pretty elite group of people. There's still plenty of them, but it falls off fast. But if you can get it down to 1 or 2 million, or even better, below $1 million, and with Starship, Elon, he can get the cost of going in Starship under $1 million. He's been throwing out numbers of a few $100,000, and so if he can get people to orbit for that price, then I actually think tons of people would go. All of us would go. I mean, the analogy that I use, and let's move it just out of orbit to Mars here for just a point of discussion. If you think about the people who moved to the new world from the old world, these were people who said, I'm going to America, and to do it, I'm going to sell my house. I'm going to sell all my possessions because I can't load them up with me. I'm going to sell my business. I'm going to turn all that into cash. I'm going to buy some tents and take stakes and shovels and supplies and a ticket on the Mayflower or whatever it might be. And off they go to, forge a pretty hard life in a completely new place. And so if you use that analogy for Mars, a couple $100,000, anyone on Earth could probably save that up. Any gainfully employed person who's going, I want to be born on Earth but die on Mars, hopefully not on impact, they can probably save up the money to make that happen. And so I think a lot will.
I'm curious about the more expedition side that you were talking about at the beginning. Is there something that's inherent to, if it is a viable analogy for us to use and we can learn some lessons from that, is there a reason that those expeditions are still as pricey as they are relatively and haven't come down so much? I know in the case of the Titanic, there's legal issues and a whole other environmental issue in terms of it, degrading over time, but those expeditions are still in the tens of thousands. Why haven't they come down closer to the single-digit thousands over time?
I think the main reason is that they already started close to their floor. And here's my argument for where the floor is in the usage of all mechanized exploration, whether it's spaceships, submarines, ships, airplanes, or cars. All of them. If you think about driving your own car, you go to a dealership and you buy a car, it's going to cost you some tens of thousands of dollars probably.
A nice station wagon.
Yeah, exactly. It might be 10 grand, 15 grand, whatever it is, your station wagon. My Subaru hatchback I brought off my brother, my first car, I think I paid 3 or 4 grand, but that was back in 1970, so it's probably more than that now. But once you own the car, if you think about the cost of operating it through its lifetime, you can do a measurement off the fuel cost. And so let's suppose every time you put $100 worth of gas into it, which I know you don't your tank doesn't hold 100 gallons, but $100 worth, but let's use this as an easy number. Every $100 you spend on gas, you probably spend another $100 on depreciation, insurance, and maintenance. and actually probably $200. So the point is, if you take all your other costs plus fuel, it usually adds up to about 3 times the fuel cost. And that's true for cars, that you can, when you run out of gas, you go fill it up and keep driving. You run out of gas, you fill it up, keep driving. It's the same for airplanes. It's the same for boats. It's the same for trains. So all these things that you can just fill up the gas tank again and go, the depreciation of the high cost of the vehicle is depreciated over many uses. Well, the one place that has not been true until now has been spacecraft, where every spacecraft was destroyed on its maiden voyage. And so think about that analogy going back to a car or a boat or a train or anything else. If every time you bought your car for 10 grand at the dealership, you put in $100 worth of gas, and at the end of running out of gas, you crush it and go buy another car. Well, no one's going to drive very much. The only times you're going to drive is when it's really essential to go drive. And so that's why the price of going to space is coming down, is because of reusability. It's a profound improvement on the cost. But in the case of the submarines, they're already reusable, right? You just charge them up and go again, charge them up and go again. And so you already were at the floor some time ago. And in fact, the trips I've made to Antarctica and the trips I've made down to Titanic and other deep targets, those have actually gone up in price in the 20 some odd years I've been doing them. I think the first price I paid to go down to super, 6,000 meters or so, was like $25,000. I think now I haven't tried to buy one of that particular depth recently, but it's closer to 100,000. And so that's actually gone up, but I think that's really just economy that's made that go up.
Is that a factor though, where it's there are very few ventures that are offering those kind of trips with very high cost of, honestly, like operation. It seems like it takes an entire ship's worth of an expedition to go out to one of these things. So you're paying a fixed price of everyone being there working. So it does. That's
correct. But you're not. But even if there were two though, if two competing companies, the price wouldn't come down much.
Right.
Because both those companies will require a huge amount of infrastructure to make that happen.
So I feel like that's kind of what I'm saying is is that a good analogy for orbital space flight that we would see in our lifetime, unless there's some crazy propulsion breakthrough, which we might be able to talk about as well. That might be a pretty good analogy for the kinds of prices that we could see as tens of thousands at best. Or am I making an assumption off of submarines that won't necessarily hold up?
No. Yeah, no. Here's the way to measure it. So if you look at the vehicle I flew in, the Russian Soyuz, the Soyuz you could also go buy from Russia, and the price today is, I haven't priced it, but it's probably about $150 million they would charge you if you go, I want to buy the Soyuz, I want to put my own 3 astronauts in it, and I'm going to go to wherever the heck I can take it. They'd say, sure, pay us the money and we'll give you all 3 seats, and it'd be about $150 million.
For you, for NASA, it'd probably $450.
Yeah, probably that's probably true. But actually, the difference in price has to do with how much training and other extras you need. But I think the pricing is actually pretty consistent. But but if you think about that, you think about, okay, well, you're going to throw it away. We know that. But the majority of the mass, as you all know very well, is really kerosene and liquid oxygen. So how much does the kerosene and liquid oxygen cost that goes into this $150,000 what will be trash soon? And the answer to that question is about $800,000. So it's $800,000 compared to a $150 million vehicle that you're going to throw away. But if you do the math of the previous thing, I said 3 times the energy cost. So instead of being $800,000, you can triple that, so maybe it's about $3 million, and that's about $1 million a seat. And so if the Soyuz was 100% reusable, they could probably operate it at about $1 million a seat. And so when Elon throws this number around of about $1 million for an eventual price of a highly reusable Dragon, for example, if you could really reuse the capsule. And at the time he was thinking of the first stage and the second stage, and right now they can't do the second stages. But the point is, the floor for chemical rockets is probably, for orbital chemical rockets that only hold a half a dozen passengers or less, it's probably about $1 million. But the reason why he thinks he can beat that with Starship is because it holds 200 people, and
just packing them in,
and so packing them in, and so but that economy of scale really does continue to push it down, and so he thinks he can get another almost order of magnitude or somewhere in that neighborhood by packing them in.
Jake's doing
I'm
math.
I'm doing a lot of math in my head now. I'm trying to... So, what do you think is going to be like different about the flights now? I mean, if they're coming down and you're starting to take advantage of Dragon and whatever's coming in the future, like if you think about your 2008 flight, is it going to be is that the market we're looking at, these sort of like 1 week trips to the ISS, or is there something different that we can do now?
Well, what's interesting about plans that, for example, Space Adventures has had. I don't know if this is their plan now, but for example, even if there was a fully private launch that NASA or the ISS partners did not want to park at the ISS, I mean you have to negotiate for that, right? You don't just because I can buy a rocket doesn't mean they'll let me dock. And so one of the things we used to work on a lot was what can we sell people that doesn't involve the ISS if we manage to have our own rocket.
It would be very cool if your customer got one of those letters from NASA. So.
well, what's interesting is obviously the farthest humanity has ever been out in space right now is around the moon and back, right? That's 3 days away. That's a good distance away. And the Apollo 8 trajectory was particularly important because it was very safe. It actually, it's that figure 8 around the moon and back. And the reason why that works is once they were lined up and launched towards the moon, by going around the leading edge of the moon in the direction of the moon's orbit, they would actually lose some energy. And so they had a free return back to the Earth. So once they were headed in the right direction, everything else is on cruise mode, right? They could literally just coast, and they would at least come back to the Earth at the end of all that. And so there's that fly we were talking about earlier. But so a free return is an important safety procedure. Well, it turns out actually a gentleman by the name of Dennis Tito, he was actually the first client of Space Adventures since I couldn't pay for I was actually supposed to be the first client of Space Adventures. That's when the .com crashed and I couldn't pay for my own first seat. So we sold that seat to Dennis Tito. But Dennis Tito, who also, he did MirrorCorp and other things too. He was pursuing this as long and hard as I was, probably even harder. So if anybody had to beat me, congrats to Dennis. He is also an incredible engineer and mathematician. He loves to plan orbits. And he has planned this fascinating orbit where you actually use the moon in a different way. You launch past the moon, but instead of doing the figure 8 around the moon, you actually go up and you get a little kick from the moon further out into space. But then on the way back down, you go past the moon again, which slows you back down, and then you fall to the Earth. So it's another free return orbit, but takes you farther away from the Earth than anyone has ever been by a long shot. And so we're going like, hey, that'd be a fun one to go do. If you're paying for a trip yourself, and and the ISS is either boring because you've already been there, or the doormat's not out right now, so they're not welcoming you. Then let's go further out into space than anyone has ever been before. And that can be done safely, relatively cheaply, and big fun.
Yeah, they've been looking at these like Gemini style flights too, where they go pretty high altitude just in low Earth orbit, right? Where it's like 1,100, 1,200 kilometers or something. That would be pretty awesome because I've heard from different astronauts that even like shuttle astronauts that went to the ISS versus shuttle astronauts that went to Hubble. ISS is like 400 kilometers, Hubble's like 600 or so. I'm ballparking here, but like even that difference, like totally changed the way the Earth looked, and so doubling.
Yeah, you look at the photos from the Hubble deployment, and you're like, damn, they were up there.
They were high.
Oh, yeah.
So.
Yeah, in fact, I can't remember if this is in the book or not, but so I already told the story about how I 72 hours prior to flight, I was actually worried if I was going to get my trip canceled out from underneath me, and so the day we finally were on the launch pad and in the final phase of the countdown, we're like, whew, at least we're going. I'm going. And then you take this amazing 8.5 minute ride, and that's all it takes to burn. You're sitting still on the ground. You burn the entire 90% of the mass of this rocket in 8.5 minutes. The engine's cut off. The thing heels over, and you actually just tumble in space for a few minutes before they turn on any attitude control. And you might think that my first thoughts when finally being in orbit and finally seeing the Earth, it would be reasonable to think that my first thoughts would be, oh wow, I made it to space. Look at the beautiful Earth down here below me. Hooray! But that is not what went through my mind. The first thing I thought when I looked out that window is, wow, we are not nearly as high up as I expected to be visually. I sure hope we're in a perfectly circular orbit, because if we're not, we're going to be re-entering again in like a moment or two, and that is really going to suck. And so, but there were no alarms going off on any of the equipment. Every gauge was reading correctly, so I didn't say anything to my crewmates. I just sort of kept listening for alarms or other information. And after we tumbled a few times, and I noticed the view out the window wasn't changing in a good way. Then I could relax and go, oh, okay, yeah, we are.
You could relax and go.
Orbit.
You could lean back just enough in a Soyuz.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, barely a little.
My feet are
not
up
much.
1 inch more than they were a second ago.
Yeah, you could use that little pokey rod and touch the window. Yeah.
Yeah. Only the commander had that pokey rod. We didn't have.
Oh, okay. It's a privilege to have the pokey rod.
Is that in any of your games? That should be a weapon. The Soyuz pokey rod.
Pokey rod?
Yeah.
No, that's a good one though. That's a good one.
Can we make the NASA gatekeeper styled in my image with the Soyuz pokey rod?
Pokey rod, absolutely.
There's got to be a better name for it than pokey rod. Right?
Pokey rod.
You named it, man.
Yeah.
What have I done? Oh my god.
But it's funny. On a previous trip out to a launch, I've stood about 200 meters from the base of a Soyuz as it launched. Well within the kill zone, and one of the things I got from one of the engineers there at the time is the key that they used to turn it on. But it was never explained to me whether that key was in the Soyuz or in mission control. It turns out it's in mission control. But it is there is a nice little aluminum, one-toothed key that has to be inserted and turned to, arm the Soyuz prior to launch, apparently.
200
I have
meters.
the key. Never seen it.
Yeah, can we talk about 200
We got to go
meters?
back to that.
What's going on there?
Were you in the blockhouse or something crazy?
Yes. Well, so this is how crazy that was. So I assumed that when I agreed to go do this, when I found it was plausible to do this, I was of course very excited, wanted to go do it. But I also assumed that we would be in some sort of bunker or something, close. If you're that close,
this is turning out to be a good story about Russia, isn't it?
Yeah, you would like to have some defenses. And so we go out with this group, and we have to go through some checkpoints, and there's guys there with guards, with big guns and stuff, and whoever our guide is convincing them that it's okay for us to be here, even though it's really not. And we go park the vehicle down by this bunker, and then we go down inside this buried bunker. And I'm going like, okay, well, somewhere in this buried bunker is going to be like a little place we can stick our nose up, or a piece of glass we can peek through, like on Space Force, if you've watched the new Space Force. And that's what I'm imagining. But instead we go down to this old dilapidated machine shop where like somebody's been sleeping down here, and there's like cans of old cat food laying around everywhere and a few cats. And it's just a trash heap. But there's no windows at all. And I'm going, well, what are we down here for? I mean, are we going to watch the launch? I mean, we're very close. I mean, we really were only 200 meters away, but we couldn't see it. And so I'm going like, what are we waiting for? What are we here for? And they said, oh, we're waiting for them to finish the sweep on the surface to get rid of anybody on the surface. And so we're hiding down here. And I said, oh, okay. And so time is now ticking down, and we're getting, 5 minutes from launch, 4 minutes from launch, 3 minutes from launch, 2 minutes from launch. And I'm going like, are we staying here? You maybe 90 seconds prior to launch. I went, okay, now. And then we all get up and go out of the bunker, and we literally just stand in the grass right in front of the rocket as this rocket launches. And it is awesome. And so because you are, if you didn't have ear protection on, you'd be hurting. If anything went wrong, you'd be dead. And the only reason that they wouldn't let us go closer than 200 meters is because it's actually outgassing things that would kill you if you were closer. So it's literally the closest you could be and survive during a nominal launch.
And the way that they know 200 meters is the safe spot?
I don't know. You can imagine, but I don't know for sure.
That is wild.
I'm gonna be having nightmares about this story, I think.
I mean, I
Going
heard
forward.
I was at NASA Goddard a couple years ago, and somebody there that works on some of the different climate missions was 800 meters from an H2. I think it was one of the original H2s. But he was inside, like you were thinking, inside a bunker with some glass, and he said it was still unbelievable. Just, okay, that's a... Now, I
You
always
must have,
thought
like,
people in
felt
those
that in your
videos
chest,
from...
like-
You seen, like, the videos of people on the... I think it's at the Xichang Satellite Launch Center, the one out of the valley in China, when they're, like, up on the gantries
Yeah,
that are
yeah.
next to the rocket.
Well,
Now-
in fact, the
now we
reason
know how this
how
happens.
how I found out about this is actually one of our handlers is a photographer. He was military and he was a photographer, and he's been in the gantry that is the electrical protection. He's been up in that during the launch. So the rocket launches right beside him, and he's got pictures there. And he also showed me some other pictures of launch, and I'm going like, how are you looking up at the bottom of this rocket as the flame is coming down towards you? And he said he was in there's not only a flame trench that funnels the fire out in one general direction, but there's some side tunnels. And he was down in one of those side tunnels shooting up at the rocket as it launched. And then he said the pressure wave actually pushed him up and out of that side tube. So he got thrown out.
Surprise!
Like, I'm sort of going like, you are crazy. You are crazy. And but yes, people do that apparently in China, but also in Russia. And as long as things go nominally, you'll survive to tell this tale. But people are well aware. I assure you, we were. Even though I expected a bunker, I did know that we were, going into the zone that is, that would not be normally accessible by the general public and shouldn't be.
The toasty zone, yeah.
The toasty zone.
We do have an update from the chat. Kerbal Space Academy is here, and he says
Excellent.
it is called a thing longer. Not the pokey. What did we call it before? Pokey rod.
A thing longer. No, the thing longer. The thing longer is from Good News, everyone. The television, Futurama.
Oh, okay.
The thing
All
longer.
right.
Yeah, the thing longer. That's from the professor on Futurama.
We're getting bad info in the chat here. We gotta.
Thanks, Kerbal Space Academy.
I thought you were supposed to teach us stuff.
Yeah.
He gave us the clue we needed to fill in the gaps. So
Fake news. Oh, that's great.
We have one order of business that we need to talk about is that you own sublunar spacecraft.
I do. In fact, I am the world's only private owner of an object on a foreign celestial body.
Now, is this a special order, or is this right off the line like your dad would buy it?
This was special order. This was actually a Sotheby's purchase in 1996, I think it was. It was right after the fall of the Soviet Union. A lot of public and private companies over in Russia were hurting for money because the economy got trashed and the government wasn't paying basically anybody. And a U.S. lawyer, a guy named Art Dula, actually went over to Russia he was helping them out on a variety of other fronts. But one of the ways that he also helped them, he said, look, you guys own a bunch of this space stuff and I can probably help you find buyers in the U.S. And so they worked with Sotheby's and they put up this Russian, one of the first ever Russian space auctions. And most of it was the stuff that you guys now see on eBay or Sotheby's or Christie's or other auctions all the time. Whether it's a manual that somebody took with them to space, or their glove, or a boot, or a thruster, or a
full
piece
spacesuit
of,
in the case of our friend Tim Dodd, the everyday astronaut. He's
exactly
full suit guy.
Exactly. All those things were coming for sale, but one item that was up for the sale was Lunokhod 2. The second Russian lunar rover that was put up on the moon at about the same time as the U.S. Landings, and they had it projected to sell for I think $10,000 or $12,000, and whereas a space suit at the time was costing something like $25,000, and I went and said, I think that's worth a lot more than $10,000, but I actually don't know how much it's worth, and I would hate to. What I usually do in auctions is I will seal a bid and put it in, and then cover your eyes and ears and let it ride. This is the only auction I participated in live, because I really just had no idea what I would be willing to pay or what I thought others might be willing to pay,
or what you in a panicked moment would be willing to pay.
That's right. Well, in fact, there was a second item I was bidding on that I did not win, and I'm glad I didn't. And that was a Soviet lunar sample, a raisin-sized lunar sample that I bid way beyond my means, way beyond reasonability. Eventually chickened out, and the person who I was bidding against made the next bid and won it. And I was going like, wow, I am so glad I didn't win that one. But anyway, that was the same auction. So I've not done live auctions since either. But in the case of Lunokhod 2, I purchased it for $68,500. But I knew even before I bought it that my whole reason to buy it is so that I could make the statement: I am now the world's only owner of an object on a foreign celestial body. And being, and you guys have probably all heard of like the lunar, I can't remember what they call themselves. The people that sell lunar property up there on the moon, and they do it by I look at a telescope, I see a little spot, and I'm going to sell that tract there because who can stop me? And but they don't really have any other claim other than nobody else seems to claim it, so I'm going to do it. In my case, I immediately followed my purchase with hiring a bunch of lawyers. So I've spent almost as much on legal fees as I have on the vehicle to assert my claim as follows. That, while there really isn't particularly good law yet for the moon, there are treaties that give you a framework for ownership of property off Earth. For example, if you're on a cruise ship and throw a life preserver off the side and it washes up on an unclaimed island in the Pacific, you don't own that island. But on the other hand, if you wash up on that island and you build a farm, you put up a fence, and you till the soil, and you grow some crops, international law says you do own that. And you don't own the whole island, but you at least own the part that you have in active use. But if you leave the island and quit using it, it goes back to nope, you don't own it anymore. And similarly, there is convention around even geosynchronous orbital positions, things that are mathematically describable spots in space. If you're the first one there and you continue to use it, you control it, you basically own it. But if you lose control of your vehicle and it leaves that zone, then it's up for grabs for everybody else. And you probably are aware of the treaties where no government will lay claim to property off Earth, but one that was not ratified was where they tried to ban private individual ownership of property off Earth. So that left the door open for private ownership. And in the case of my lunar rover, first of all, it's still in use. There are mirrors on board the lander and the rover that are used by modern observatories to do Earth-Moon distance detecting. So even though it's not moving any further, it is still in use. So it's not junk. It's used. It has. So I don't think anybody would argue with I own the rover and the lander. I don't think anybody would argue that I own the dirt immediately under it. But the next assertion is that my rover tilled the soil for 40 kilometers. And so that 40-kilometer trackway, I believe I can assert ownership on also. And then my rover also surveyed the land from a 6-foot-high pedestal with 360-degree cameras for everything that could be seen from a height of 6 feet along that 40-kilometer trackway. So I also claim that visually mapped area that my rover has mapped. So my claim is modest. It's only 40 kilometers by a couple kilometers wide. But that is my claim on the moon, and I actually believe it would hold up at least, better than others, if it ever came down to push the shove. So you're welcome to come to the moon. I've even offered some Google Lunar X Prize people. I already said you're welcome to come on my property, but I will even pay you for some photos you take while on my property. But I'm also going to charge you a pretty much similar amount for rental to be on my property. So,
Jake, we've got our spot for the future lunar edition of Off-Nominal.
Exactly. Yeah.
All right.
Future headquarters of Off-Nominal. Yeah, for sure. We've been on. We have
a lot of different future headquarters.
We've got one is that bunker that he watched the Soyuz launch from. That's one definitely on my list, but I'm eyeing up this spot on the moon as well.
Okay, I have another question, a line of questions here. So we recently got some news. Actually, we kind of participated in some of this news that Tom Cruise may be filming a movie in space, and it looks like he's working with Axiom and NASA a little bit. You also have the claim of the first science fiction movie filmed in space, which I watched last night. And I think the quote that I said to Anthony was, "This is the best thing I have ever seen in my life."
Excellent, Brock. Excellent.
It was great. I want to kind of hear your take on that. What do you think about this movie in space?
Well, so first of all, any excuse to go to space is a good excuse. So for Tom, if you think about the production budget of a blockbuster movie, they're pushing $1 billion nowadays for making a movie. And so to put $100 million into a flight to space is plausible. I'm not sure the results would actually be better than you'd get out of doing it simulated on the ground, because zero-G simulations are pretty darn good these days. And your ability to control actors and cameras and other things is much better in a soundstage or even on a zero-G flight than it is actually in space. So, but it's fun to be there and knock yourself out. But it is true though that one of the things that I learned, and literally, even though when I first heard this, and they were claiming it to be the first movie ever filmed in space, and I was going, nah, it's really not. I really did offer, in seriousness, to offer some advice. Now, and I'm not the only person that could, because there's some IMAX films that have actually been filmed in space, and so they've learned some of these same lessons. But it's fascinating that when you're in space, it's like being on a three-dimensional air hockey table, right? Nothing sits still. Everything migrates. And so, if you set up a camera shot and you're supposed to start here and end here, good luck with that, right? The people and objects are going to go, in completely different directions than would have been planned. And so, understanding that and managing it is adds a level of difficulty and complexity to the shot. So I had offered to help consult. Strangely, no one's contacted me yet.
Just us, actually.
But what's interesting is Tom has a good friend at the Explorers Club in New York that's also a good friend of mine. So we actually have a 1 degree of separation that has made the offer not just in jest, but actually in seriousness. Because I think there is, if you're really going to go below that kind of money up there, you really better get as much of this planned out as well as you can before you go do it.
You're welcome to bring him on here. We can have the discussion live on air whenever you want.
Great. All right. Perfect.
Yeah. Happy to do a film.
You let us know, okay?
Yeah. I will. If he calls me up and we need a place to chat, we'll do it right here.
Yeah, I've been thinking a lot about that. Is that the logistics of filming in space, and just when they announced it, there's a bajillion questions going to your brain. It's okay, is it Tom going up? Is Tom going to bring one camera person, a camera person who is the director, a camera person and a director? What's it going to look like? What kind of equipment? How much mass do they need for the camera? And I just my brain explodes when I start thinking about it all. And then you bring up the simple question of just moving the camera around.
It was so hard. It was so hard to get shots. And by the way, then you run into the things I ran into for filming Apogee of Fear on YouTube. And I also ran afoul of Russian, what's the word, superstition.
Oh, shit.
One of the things you learn quickly in the space program in Russia is how much superstition there is. For example, there are these rituals you go through that most of which are just kind of fun, and you do them mostly in my mind because they're fun. But there are things that were done since the beginning. You're always blessed with some holy water from a Russian Orthodox priest, and you sign the door of the room you stayed in the night before, and you watch this one movie on the bus on the way out to the launch pad. You watch White Sands in the Desert, because everybody does. And there's a place where the bus goes down below a hill so that nobody can see you, and everybody stops and goes and pees on the tire of the van that's taking them there. And you're going oh, these are kind of fun. Or there's one where when you start your walk up the gantry to climb up on board, one of the Russian generals gives you a kick on the butt. And I had forgotten about that one until I got the kick on the butt. I went, oh yeah, that's the ritual, But also,
for 1 second, you were like, oh shit, it's the NASA lawyer. He's back.
The irony. But another one you don't do is you don't shake hands through a doorway. And that's on your ground base house or in space. When the hatch opens up and you might think about, hey, comrade on the other side, let me shake your hand. You don't do that. That's bad luck. And they really, really believe it. They won't do it. And so I went through all that, and I knew all that. But when Tracy Hickman, the writer who's probably best known for the Dragonlance series of books, he wrote the script for me. And the reason why I asked him to write that script is he had also shown me a game proposal he had done some years previous about this, he called it Party Flicks, this game you could play at home where you'd start with a script and tell your friends what their parts were, but no one got to read the script. All you did is said, okay, Bob and Martha, you go to the kitchen, here's your lines, say them, and now let's film the next scene. And you film the whole thing in order, and only after it's completely filmed do you rewind, you get some popcorn, sit in the living room, and see what the film is you've all made, because you shot it in order, all on the first take. And so that I figured I could convince my crewmates to participate in, because it would be done in a hurry. It wouldn't interfere with either their professional or personal time. But when I brought this up to my crewmates, because 2 of them were already in space before I launched, so I didn't really get a chance to talk to them about it before I met them in space. And so I'm going, hey, one of the things I like to do is film this movie. And they're going like, it's okay, yeah, fine, so whatever. Can we see the script? And I showed them the script, and they said, oh, we can't participate. And I'm like, why not? And they said, as you know, the script shows that we leave the space station without you, and you stay behind. And they say, we think that's bad luck, because already the previous 2 Soyuzes prior to our return have had bad malfunctions that could have killed the crew. And we made a spacewalk to go remove some explosive bolts that hopefully have repaired that. But we think participating in a movie that makes fun of, or has in some way implies that something might go off-nominal, they thought was bad mojo. And so they literally wouldn't participate. So I had to rewrite it in real time while I was in orbit.
And yet the Anomaly Day 1 is still the title in the movie. Anomaly event Day 1, Day 6. Jake and I were pumped. Yeah, we ran a thing a year or 2 ago to figure out what our fan community was called, and we've determined they are called anomalies. So we felt very excited to see that in the movie as well.
Yeah.
The no handshakes through door thing. Do we know where that came from? Because it sounds a lot to me like that was some Apollo-Soyuz test project finagling, that they didn't want to have a handshake from a Soyuz to an Apollo, so they had to make the docking adapter and then do the handshake in there.
Well, you know why the docking adapter was changed, right, to this,
yeah,
right?
Because nobody wanted to be either end of the docking adapter.
Yeah.
And
so
the Russians apparently wasn't going their way. They wanted to have a handshake in the docking adapter area.
Yeah, apparently, yeah.
That's some weird history there.
Yeah, that's.
I think we just passed the date of that as well. I saw some tweets about that recently, so we're being very topical.
Yeah.
Jake, we forgot to do some homework or housekeeping up front.
We did, yeah. We have so Richard, well, I'll give you a little backstory here, but we actually a couple episodes ago, we kicked off a fundraiser that just finished up, and so we wanted to share some of the results of that. But this was for we picked 2 organizations that are helping kind of fight racial inequality and racial injustice in space and in STEM. So it was Black Girls Code and the Banneker Institute, and so we had some generous people that were matching for us, and we finished that up. And so we're so super excited because our listeners really stepped up. We had like this awesome showing. Everyone who's listening here is just an amazing person, and it's just awesome. So there's the results that we got there. With our matching funds, $35,000 raised for these 2 groups. So we wanted to make sure we took an opportunity on this podcast to thank the listeners for this outstanding work. I don't know, Anthony, do you expect a number this high when we started?
Definitely 100% not at all. And the cool thing is that the amount that we raised for Banneker specifically is higher than their listed figure for an entire student. So
yeah,
we had John Johnson on last show. We'll probably bring him back next year, because one student next year will be entirely funded by everything that we did over the last month. So
yeah, that's super
incredible.
That's phenomenal. Well, congratulations. And I find these to be very interesting and important times we're in, on this subject. And I have to reflect even on my own career in the video gaming industry. The video gaming industry is another industry that is in need of introspection and change on this same front. And it's not for lack, or at least I did not perceive on a personal level that it was not for lack of trying. I consider myself a militantly anti-sexist person. I wouldn't even let my wife take my last name. We blended our names because I wanted to make sure she wasn't giving up her identity, etc. And yet, the number of female engineers I've employed through my career is low. The number of people of color I've employed through my career is low. And I used to say that's because even though I would interview, non-white geeky males, there were very few that came up through the system that I could employ. I mean, I really felt that way. But I was at about a year and a half ago, maybe 2 years ago. I was at a development event at the University of Texas, and had a younger cohort, a much more integrated cohort, and I was giving my patent excuse for not having done better, and they called me on it and said the following. They said, "So, Richard, on your website, does your website show diversity in your employees and in your management?" I went, "No." Does your call to action, or does your call to come join us, include specific statements about your lack of diversity or lack of having achieved that goal and your desire to overcome it? And I went, "No." And I said, "Well, how would you expect any of these people to be applying to you then if you are not, admitting that, or fixing the fact that if you don't look like us, why would we apply?" And I went, "Wow, you are just so right." And so it just showcased to me how easy it is for those of us who even feel like we're hopefully at least not part of the problem, and hopefully are being part of the solution, how easy it is for us to miss these really important beats. And things like raising money, of course, are super important. But having these discussions and making sure that everybody is really not just saying, "Hey, it's not my fault," but we're really going back and addressing why after all this, a generation or two of talking about it, why has it not been fixed? And I think we all can play a part, not only with our cash, but with our actions to really move the world forward right now.
Yeah, we were talking about the same thing. Is that that story sounds so familiar to me, because I'm the same way. I feel like I talk the talk, and I do all these things, and then when all this stuff started happening, we were looking back and doing some retrospection, and the people that we're bringing on this show, and it is definitely not as diverse as it should have been, and so we're trying to fix that as well. And so I think it's good that we keep talking about it. And that's why I think it's really important to do the update now, because we're about 2 months since the start of the most recent demonstrations and movements against this stuff, and it's really important to not let this fade out and burn out into some smoke, and until the next bad thing happens. Like, we can't let that happen, right? And so we got to keep working on it, and I think that this is a good first step.
I'm hoping next year, by the time that the 2021 Banneker season rolls around, the pandemic will have faded a little bit. I'm hoping by then. I'm not super optimistic, but if so, I'm hoping to drive up for the summer and hang out for a day or something, because we will have sponsored one of the members there. So it will be pretty awesome too. But just the response on that is incredible.
I'm blown away. These listeners are just, we bow down to you totally.
Yeah.
Should we do some picks?
I think we should. Yeah.
Who wants to go first?
I'll go first this time.
Okay, that's different.
Yeah, I know. I usually leave it till the end because I don't know why. But so I'm gonna go a little off book. It's not super space related. It's not space related at all. But I've been obsessed with this new podcast. So it's called the Fall of Civilizations podcast, and they're long form. They're like 2 to 4 hour long podcasts, and they just kind of go back into ancient human history and look at like the Sumerians or the Aztecs or the Romans in Britain and all these kinds of places, and they explore a civilization and they kind of outline what happened to it and why it's not around anymore. And it's just awesome. They have a Patreon. I joined up on the Patreon and everything. So
what's that one called? It sounds really cool. That sounds like one I would enjoy too. So what's that one called?
Yeah, it's called the Fall of Civilizations podcast. So it's a guy named Paul Cooper, and he I think he does it full time, and he just does these really heavily researched. He's got voice actors that come in. He does these cool things. Like he had an episode with about Easter Island, Rapa Nui, right? And he had locals from the island record some cultural music of the time, and they put that music on the recording. Like, it's just so cool, some of the stuff that he does. So I've been I go hiking here on the weekends in the mountains in Vancouver, and I save the episodes for hikes. So I go up to a parking lot. I don't have cell phone reception. I fire up one of these things and I walk around in the woods, and it just really trips me out.
Creeps you out. That's awesome. Richard, do you have any picks for us?
It's fascinating. I am a huge fan of the moth, and maybe you guys already know that one well. So, one of the things I love about the moth, and I hadn't even heard of the moth prior to being invited to participate in the moth, and my participation is actually what landed me my book deal, because somebody who heard me speak at the moth was in the audience was an agent that said, we got to go write a book. We got to help you write a book, and. But I stayed a fan of it, and the reason why is that it taught me that really everyone has a great story, and I mean literally everyone. And I think it's really easy for people, and maybe this is even biased by people who believe that they're in some way special or have accomplished something special in their own life. And I think everybody's sort of proud of whatever it is they do in some way in exclusion of others. But when you participate in something like the moth, and once you start listening to the moth, you realize everyone's life journey is not just unique, but frankly compelling. And if you really understand who they became and why, and some of the twists and turns that kind of molded them that way, and that it really makes you, I think, cherish humanity in a way that at least I hadn't previously. And I'm a big admirer of their methods, and what I mean by that is when I signed up, when they said, "Hey, you want to come on the moth and do a presentation?" I was like, "Okay, yeah, whatever. I do this all the time. I'm happy to do it." And they said, "Oh, well, okay, that's great. But by the way, you have to show up 3 days in advance, and for 3 days you will rehearse with our producer and all the other presenters, and you will present with each other. It has to be exactly 10 minutes, not your usual hour that it takes you to tell one of your stories." And at 10 minutes, the microphone will be turned off. So if you're not done, it's over. And I'm kind of going like, what have I signed up for? I'm like, God, this sounds nightmarish. I use my slides as the way I stay on, keep the flow going, and to do it extemporaneously and memorize, or not even, it's not even memorized. To keep it feeling right and tight, I was totally intimidated. But then after I went through the process, I realized, no, it's, they're professionals, and with the other speakers, they really help you be so much better than you. It's the same story. It's just way better told. You understand you learn a lot about communications and how to do it well. So I just became a big fan of the whole process. I became a fan of every other speaker, and I listen to it all the time now, just because I'm going like, there is not a subject they've covered, not a person I've heard speak that I'm going like, wow, I would like to know that person. I'd like to sit down, have a chat, share a drink, and I am confident, that we would enjoy sharing stories.
There's a word for that, actually. Hey, it's called sonder. You heard this word, sonder?
Sonder.
Yeah.
SAUNDER.
SONDER. And it's just like the realization that every person you see has some story that's as vivid and complex as you might imagine. It's that and when you think about it, times 7.5 billion people, you're like, wow, there's a lot going on.
Yeah, exactly. There is. Yeah, exactly. And that's my new favorite word. So I'm going to store that.
The fact that was a word that was so short and not either Dutch or German surprised me. Right? Like, because usually it's like, it's a word that means this entire paragraph. That's probably Dutch or German. But
yeah.
That's amazing.
Anthony, what do you got?
Oh, and that was themoth.org for anyone trying to find it.
Yes.
I'm fighting this fly right now.
You're fighting a moth
right
now?
God, I think I am. So a show or two ago, I said to everyone, buy a telescope, literally whatever fits in your budget. It's a great summer for, other than the weather in the Northeast, great summer for astronomy. Just this past week, I was talking to a friend that I worked with who is going camping next month up at a state park in Pennsylvania called Cherry Springs State Park, which is the darkest zone in Pennsylvania. Beautiful views of the Milky Way, incredible night sky. And he was like, hey, should I buy a telescope? I said, have you ever seen the Milky Way before? And he said, no. I said, do not futz around with a telescope. Buy a nice set of binoculars. Astronomy binoculars, man. These, like, sometimes I forget how much I love just partaking and looking around the night sky with some binoculars. For some reason, I think, not like doing all the setup and then looking through a tiny eyepiece. Just being able to have a pair of binoculars that gets both your eyes going at the same time, it's so much more engaging. And I forgot, I have this pair of Celestron 7x50s, which are pretty wide view. I use them a lot for like finding targets that I'm going to pick out with the telescope, or traveling because they're so small. I can just throw them in my bag. These were $35. Like, I forgot how cheap these were. I was like, oh, this must be like $100 pair. $35 for this pair of Celestron binoculars, and they are amazing, and I would highly recommend just grabbing some binoculars and looking around. If you want to spend some cash, the Canon image stabilized binoculars are incredible. My dad has a pair. They're probably $700 to $1,000. They're pretty expensive for the image stabilization, but it's like you push this button and it blows your mind how it's stabilized.
Really?
Yeah, it's
I didn't know there was such thing existed.
It's amazing.
Image stabilized binoculars.
Yeah, the Canon ones are really nice.
Can I thought a kind of a thought and a question on that too, between those two? By the way, I totally agree with everything you just said. And what's interesting is I've had on my previous homes, I've had observatories. I have one planned in my next Texas house as well.
And in the shed that you're currently sitting in, now that we've talked about
that. Yeah, there might be, now that we're talking about that, we're going to punch a hole here and get one going. But what's interesting about technology now is it used to be that as an amateur, everybody's fighting to get as big an aperture as they can to gather as much light as they can, to be able to see stuff. But it turns out that I don't care how big an aperture you get. If you're looking just optically with your eye, the faint nebulas up there are still going to be pretty darn faint. But the great news is that even a low-quality webcam, when you drop that in an eyepiece, which their webcam eyepieces now for everything,
yeah,
and for free or $50, you can get a piece of software to stack those images. You can get phenomenally good space photography that is way better than you can see by eye with that little telescope that's behind you.
Yep.
That little scope behind you would get better images by far than the instrument I had in my last home, which was a computer-controlled tracking device, but did not have an eyepiece, a camera eyepiece that could stack images. And so that simple technology has made it way better.
Precisely why so he's talking about this tiny 4-inch. It's a Maksutov little thing here, because I've got an 8-inch Dobsonian that I keep out at my parents' house in Jersey to get away from some of the light pollution. But I'm about to have a kid. Oh, I should mention that as well. I mentioned it on the other show, but about to have my first child. So people on Off-Nominal, you might miss a month from me coming up. We haven't determined what we're going to do with this particular show yet. Jake's got the keys. But knowing that I'm not going to be able to drive out randomly whenever I wanted to have something here. But it also, I've got this great, I guess I'm doing like pick time over here, Jake. This is way more picks than usual. So I bought it with, I'm struggling here. I've got this mount is a Skywatcher AZ GTI. It is so tiny, and it does tracking. And it can hold like 11 pounds on the dovetail mount. So this is small enough to do that. Refractors are as well, but it does tracking and all that. So I could attach the camera that I'm using right here and do some astrophotography off my back deck, even in light pollution zone. And like Richard's saying, get pretty incredible stuff. So
cool.
Here's another bonus pick.
And I presume even if that, I couldn't tell if that mount will take out the rotation.
Oh yeah.
But even if it doesn't, the software would. So yeah, that'll take out the rotation
so you can unlock this and do it all by hand, and it will still maintain the tracking that you have set up. But it will. There's an iOS and Android app that you can connect via Wi-Fi, align it correctly on something that's bright and visible, and then it can track all night.
It takes care of it from there.
Yeah, it's amazing. So
phenomenal.
Pick Central, Jake. So Jake, cool. How's those picks, Jake? You like those picks?
I like those picks, man.
Man.
Wow. Cool. Okay.
I'm just getting them all in here.
Yeah.
Richard, this has been an absolute blast hanging out. I feel like you are king of the people that Jake and I try to be, both in the realm of development and space nerds. You're like peak of both. So it's just been awesome to hang out for a while. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks.
Please let everyone know where they can find you if they somehow have not come across you on the internet. Where should we point them to?
Well, I would say I'm most active, although, I have an account on most social media, but the one I'm really active on is Twitter. So I'm at Richard Garriott on Twitter. Beware, we're in election cycle right now. So in addition to games and space, I'm a little obsessed, read a lot, with politics. And my wife is actually a major fundraiser for the opposition candidate at the moment. And so beware that you'll see me flying that flag a lot right now. But after the election, it'll settle back down into my other main interests, which is space and games. So you'll get everything. And which actually just brings up the interesting issue, which is one of the, in fact, in the book which we've referenced, the Explore Create that I wrote a few years ago. One of my beliefs is that if you're going to do anything, if you're going to do podcasts, whatever it is you're going to do as your vocation or avocation, if all you do is research your immediate competitors, your immediate predecessors, all you'll do is iterate on yourself or what they're doing. That the only way to do things that are really original and really compelling and hopefully lasting and important is if you cast a net for understanding and inspiration that is as wide as possible, as broad as possible. And so I feel that my games include a lot of science, include a lot of astronomy, include a lot of politics, include a lot of social commentary. And I periodically have people come to me on Twitter going like, "Hey, get off the politics. Why don't you go back to making games?" And I'm going like, my games are all politics and all social commentary. So it's sort of already there. That's what I do. And so anyway, so yeah, if you're interested, come see me on Twitter. Drop me an email. If you go to my Richard Garriott website, I think this is richardgarriott.com. There's a contact message there too. I'm responsive pretty much to everybody that writes in. So I'd love to chat.
Cool.
Jake, what have you been up to?
I'm super busy.
You've not had a lot going on, right?
Oh my God, yeah. So Richard, my main podcast. This is our fun kind of side gig, but my main podcast is about Mars exploration, and it's a busy couple of weeks for Mars, like we got to say. So
yes, it is.
United Arab Emirates have launched, Chinese have launched, so we're 2 for 3. Perseverance, the main event coming up. So we will have a live stream event that I'm doing with that. I have. All these details aren't quite out yet, so you're getting a sneak preview here, YouTube. But my good friend Tanya Harrison, who is a professional Martian planetary scientist, she'll be co-hosting with me on a live stream as we watch Perseverance launch. We have some cool guests showing up to talk about different parts of the mission. It's going to be really exciting. So I'm pretty busy doing that. So I'll keep an eye on our Twitter, We Martians Twitter, for that, and it's going to be really fun. I'm excited.
And then you'll sleep after that. You'll take
and then I'll finally sleep. Yeah.
Mars is such an exciting place right now. It's so hard to get to. Not only the launch is really cool, but the landings are even cooler to watch and keep bite your fingernails for. But I think Mars is clearly the most important space target in our next decade of activity. So
music to Jake's ears.
Yeah,
let's get there, and let's get there as fast as we can.
Let's do it. Anthony, what about you?
Oh, I've had some good interviews this week on main engine cutoff.
You've been busy.
Yeah, we did a lot this week. So Caleb Henry, who's a writer at Space News, came on to talk about. There's like a lot of satellite drama right now. The FCC is fighting with like everybody, so there's a ton to dive into. And then I talked to 2 members of Astrobotic, who are one of the first 3 companies that are sending landers to the moon next year. We're a year away from their first mission right now.
Yikes.
So they might go see Richard's rover. I don't know exactly, but I mean, they're not.
We've talked about it. We've talked about it.
We've talked about it. Yeah. So that was fun. We talked a lot about, the way that they've got 2 different landers because they're the ones flying the big Viper rover that's going to the South Pole in a couple years. So we talked a lot about like small landers, big landers, payload management, a lot of nerdy stuff. So this is a good time for space, which is exactly why I'm having a kid right now, so I can take a month off and ignore all that.
Astrobotic is also working with DHL to deliver little packages to the moon.
I was looking at that. And, I'm thinking we should send some stuff on this rover. It's a couple $100.
So,
is it?
Yeah, it's
Sticker?
And I actually worked with them on an advertisement, a marketing campaign, because for Astrobotic for the moon. But I had also worked with DHL to actually deliver a package to the ISS. That was one of the commercial activities I did to the ISS. Was I actually delivered a DHL package from Earth to the ISS, and then took a different package from the ISS back down to Earth. So, in any case, so I'm a fan of DHL and Astrobotic because I agree it's hard to get personal things up there. And by the way, if you too want to become one of the only private owners of an object on the moon, now's your chance. Get in there and start claiming territory. Come on.
Jake, we got to put something on this lander. Everybody send us your ideas for what it's like. They're very small. They're a couple inches that you can send up, but we should definitely do
coins.
it.
Things the size of coins and postage stamps.
Maybe we should make like an off-nominal challenge coin or something.
Ooh.
Yeah, see, that would work.
All right. We're going to do that.
All right, we're gonna talk.
Thank you so much, Richard, for hanging out with us. You've been a
Of course,
blast.
my pleasure. No, I'll come back
Oh,
anytime.
I did it abrupt. We always do it abrupt.
Yeah, we always do it abrupt.
It's okay.
That works.
We're getting some of that transatlantic latency kicking in at this point, but
Yeah, I think so. Your latency is not as bad as the United Arab Emirates. I was trying to have an interview with some of the Mars Hope team in Dubai, and I was having some struggles. It was not working out very well.
JBFC
It's truly a pleasure to be with you. So thank you.
Richard,
Yeah,
you're
totally.
the best. We will talk, I'm
Thanks.
sure, to get that whole Tom Cruise thing set up. So
All right.
go enjoy the Parisian night with the
Anthony,
fam.
you want to hit the stop on the cast?
I will.
Oh yeah, I will. Beautiful. Thank you so much, Richard. See you later.
Of course. Pleasure.
All right.
Space Shuttle Discovery still on its way to orbit after a successful ascent up through main engine cutoff.
Oh,
I'm bringing us back. Hi, YouTube.
cool.
We're back.
We're back. Are we gonna watch a movie now?
Oh my God. Should we? That was awesome.
That was so much fun.
I'm hitting stop on all my things. So yeah, YouTube, we took a little bit of a break there just to like get our buttons pushed and all, but we are back for a little while here.
Zoomed in action. Are we zoomed in right now?
Well, it's just a 50-50 split.
The way our software works, guys, is I don't really get to see what you see. I just see Anthony, and that's about it.
Oh, I can
So
send you what you're seeing, what they're saying. This is what they're saying.
this would be good framing because, like, for all I know, I'm just like, like I'm sitting like this half the time.
That's true. If you want this, that's cool. That's cool.
We're still learning video. I'm okay. We're still figuring
I
it
feel
out.
like we did pretty good here.
I think we did pretty good. Yeah.
All audio uploads complete. It says that on your end too, right? Does it tell you that on your end of the cast?
Yep.
Man, that was so fun.
The combo of upper and downer is hitting me right now. I'm just like hot.
What else is going on, everybody out there? Still got some people hanging
Yeah.
out, so that's good.
Do we?
Couple
How's our
people.
YouTube viewership right now? Gotta build up that sub
We've
count.
been in the tens.
In the tens. Oh dear.
It's a good crew.
It's a slow. It's a
Did
slow
we have a good
growth. It
amount in
always
the
is, right?
Discord today too? It looks like we had some
Yeah,
good.
there's like
Our
5 or
Europeans
10 in
showed
there.
up.
Yeah.
We've got a
It's good the
Moscow
Europeans
Mule
showed
calling in from Ireland.
This is good, man. I'm like pretty.
You're into that?
I'm pretty excited about this. I had to stop drinking whiskey because I was like I have an allergy or something. But this works. This is okay. It's a small amount.
You have an allergy, or you have a tendency to drink too much?
No, like every time I have whiskey now, like just one glass of whiskey, the next day I feel like I have a cold. It's the weirdest thing. Like my throat's closed up. I like
Are you getting old?
coffee. My nose is stuffed. I have it's like congestion in my face. Like it's bad.
I think he's just getting old, everybody.
Radish is asking if I drank at 8 a.m. Yes, I did. I had a cream liqueur whiskey in my coffee. I didn't want to be left out. Oh yeah, like you've never drank at 8 in the morning before.
We've drunk dialed you later than that.
Earlier than that?
Earlier, I don't know.
Rip. Not since I turned 21. Brutal. Oh,
Man, that was so much fun.
that was so much fun. He's great.
I had so many things I wanted to get to. Here's a short list
Yeah.
of things I wanted to get to.
Yeah, I didn't get all of
Whether
mine
his
either.
dad thought Skylab should be canceled or not. I really wanted to figure that one out on a personal level. The time that he almost drowned all of the Austin royalty on his lake. This one, everybody
that
out
sounds
there.
like a made-up story. But
It sounds like
not.
a made-up story. I sent Jake a screenshot the other day. I was reading his book. He had a dinner party after he went to the Titanic and had a themed Titanic dinner party on a barge on a lake, and then had a whole dinner, and then they hit an iceberg and the boat sank. It actually sank, and he had scuba divers in the lake waiting to save people, and anyone who got to shore, he got on a lifeboat. If they were dry, he gave them a newspaper with their photo on it that says they made it, and if they were wet, he gave them a newspaper with their face on it that said they died tragically. What?
It's like the most extra thing.
It's so extreme and amazing, and like I literally was reading this and I was sitting on like an armchair in the living room, and I squealed, and my wife was like, "What is happening?" I was like, "I need to read you this."
They're asking the chat's asking if they knew that was going to happen.
No,
The
nobody
answer's
knew.
no. What did he say? It's like I eventually became friends with the mayor, but his wife never liked me.
Yeah. Oh, apparently the Austin mayor had a glass of brandy and was standing on the bow of the ship going down with the ship.
That's exactly what I would
But
do.
his wife got in a lifeboat that then tipped over, and she got dunked by somebody else, so she was very angry, but the mayor was content to just go down with the ship. So, man, just incredible.
So funny.
So I've heard a lot of stories about his Britannia Manor, as it's called in Austin. There's a guy out there named Brian Brushwood he is formerly a touring magician. Now he does a whole bunch of stuff on the internet that I like, and I think they were like either friends when Brian was younger or just know each other from the Austin scene. And he always throws like epic haunted houses. He spent like way too much money on haunted houses at his house in Austin, doing the same kind of theatrics. So I've heard all these crazy stories about the stuff that he has pulled off over the years. And I guess the Titanic one was just like, the Modern Rogue people are talking about in the chat. It's really good if you want to check out some other non-space related, very interesting stuff. And I believe that when Richard was on the ISS, he did a trick that Brian Brushwood had created, a magic trick.
Oh, really?
On the ISS as part of his thing. So yeah,
was that
he's
the playing card thing?
No, not the playing card one. It was a different, you can find it if you look. It's like a really interesting. It's a thing that uses the internet in a very clever way.
Okay. I'll add it to my list of stuff to look at.
You were talking about the fall of civilization. Number one, Richard's eyes lit up. Number two, how long are those shows?
They're like 2 to 4 hours, yeah.
Okay. Less than a Hardcore History.
Yeah. We need to get this here. Radish, is it hardcore history in terms of level of detail? It is, but it's different. I mean, like Dan Carlin is very much about like the human experience, right? Dan Carlin.
And he's got his quote voice that he does when he's reading a quote.
The Dan Carlin quote voice. And as the battery rained down on the plane, so that's like a Dan Carlin way. It's all about the visceral human experience. This one is more about it's more macro, right? So it's a lot about like
an anecdote. I said to the other guy in the other room. Is our Dan Carlin quote voice better than the Rush Limbaugh? When did we do the Rush Limbaugh one? On that random stream that we did where Pat said mainstream media and we did the Rush Limbaugh about space. We got to bring that one back.
What would you do? I don't know if I'd be any better.
You sound a little too like the movie trailer guy.
Yeah, a little bit. So this one is like, it's more macro, so it's a lot more like somber and looking at like just the whole, like the tragedy and the sadness of the end of, watching everything end. So it's
who is the host?
Paul Cooper, his name is.
Okay. For some reason, I thought it was going to be the history of Rome guy. Because this sounds like a thing he would do.
Apollo Control, Houston.
I forget the history of
Yeah, I
Rome
don't know.
guy's name.
50 seconds away from time of LOS now. Our distance away from the moon.
Oh, we got to get some Wirecast links out here.
Velocity.
Oh, yeah. You can actually send the one that we're using right now.
Oh, okay. I'll
Because
do
that
it.
will be good until 5 p.m.
You're in mission control. We're standing by.
Off-Nominal planning.
Certainly a great deal of
Everyone's here is in on the planning at this point. Number one, we should definitely make challenge coins and send one to the moon.
so at 68 hours.
Are you in on this?
5 minutes.
Yes.
It's literally, I was looking at it's like DHL moon box.
How hard is it to make a challenge coin when you're making
I don't
just
know.
one?
No,
Well,
we're
I
going to
guess
make
you
a
can make,
bunch
like,
and sell
500.
them to fund the thing going to the moon.
Ah, there we go. Yeah. Listeners can pay for it.
If anyone out there listening knows anything about challenge coins or creating challenge coins, please hit us up. Because we need to do this. Here, I'll show this on.
For our go no go decision.
You can still see this stream, right?
Yep.
So there's these different size boxes that you create, or you can buy. I mean, and then you just deliver them the box,
1 minute.
and then it goes on the moon.
Now from loss of signal.
So here are the prices.
Away from the moon now. 401 nautical miles. Velocity
So for
That's
reference,
not too bad.
35.
this one's ½ inch
Continue with it.
by, I guess, yeah, it's hexagon, right? So
An inch.
½ an inch diameter. I guess that's the maximum extent, point to point, or is that wall to wall? Have to find that out. But essentially, we can send an
That's
SD
like
card.
that's like a dime, right?
It's like a dime.
Okay.
Yeah, we got to. These have to be
Yeah.
really tiny challenge coins. Maybe not a challenge coin. Maybe should we send every episode of every podcast we've ever done?
That's a good one. Yeah.
Maybe we should just do that.
Huh. Yeah, one of those micro SDs, right?
Yeah, like load them all on there and some selfies and send them.
And it looks good.
Wrap them in a bunch of tinfoil to try to prevent against radiation.
Go. Repeat.
Huh.
Send us ideas if you can think of something that tiny. Let us know. Anyway, should we wrap it up?
I think we should wrap it up.
Everybody hanging out, you are our heroes.
Thanks so much.
We're probably gonna have one more episode before I'm out of here for a month.
I think so.
But
yeah.
even
And
at
then I
that
gotta figure
point-
out what the hell to do.
I feel like Off-Nominal could be the one thing that I keep doing to keep me in touch.
Because if we knock off the next episode right before you go,
Right.
and then the other one right after you get back, that's not
Right.
too bad, right? Yeah.
The danger is we
Alright.
have it scheduled and then
At 68 hours,
Yeah.
58.
I believe
Disaster.
we tentatively have Lauren Grush scheduled.
Knock on wood.
So she asked recently, when can I come back on the show?
And she learned very quickly that's the magic word to get on the show.
Was when can I do the planning for you?
Yeah. That's perfect.
All right, thank you,
friends.
everybody.
7
Bye.
feet per second.
I always forget where my camera is.